Welcome back to What's the Point Anyway? I'm your host Luke, and this is my conversation with Jeff Jones, a retired military intelligence veteran out of America who's recently turned his focus to writing a book which is called Unforeseeable, A Bargain with Time, The Cost of a Better Tomorrow. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and if you do, please do us a favour, share it with anyone else who you also think will enjoy, and give us a like, hit subscribe if you're not already doing so. Thanks so much. Thanks for waking up so early to come on and have a chat.
It's it's not early on a normal day. I would have been up, hour ago anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Perfect. So what does life entail for you now?
Right now I work at a small business that does background investigations for things like pre-employment for, people that are looking to kind of, check out potential, people that they're going to rent places to, like apartments and stuff.
Yeah.
And just that's pretty much the normal 9 to 5 job. Me, my wife, my 2 kids, my wife's several cats.
Yeah. And so how did you get into that? So your background was military, right?
Right. My background is military intelligence,
Yeah.
and I was a United States Air Force intelligence analyst for the last 15 of my 20 years in the military. I got out. I did almost 10 years as a law enforcement crime analyst, which is basically the same thing, except instead of dealing with, terrorists, half a world away, I'm dealing with the various, knuckleheads that are breaking laws, right here in the local area.
Yeah. And so now you're doing background checks. So that what you're doing now must be pretty easy compared to the old stuff, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. The names are a whole lot easier to pronounce.
Yeah. Very good. How have you found the transition getting out of military?
It was a little difficult to begin with, but thanks to the fact that I have an amazing wife who has, as of this past December, has put up with me for 30 years.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you got 2 kids, you said?
Yes, I've
Yeah, nice.
got a son and I got a daughter. Both of them are amazingly brilliant, just like their mom.
Yeah, nice one. So I'm like, I've just ticked over at the time of this recording, 40 sort of published episodes of the podcast. And I try to sort of speak to everyone, but there's definitely a Christian sort of skew and heaps of Americans, a bunch of Australians, not many people from anywhere else, but heaps of Americans, which is why I'm always doing these weird sort of time slots with you that we're doing to try to line things up. But I think you're actually my first sort of military man to come on, which is odd given that, there's typically a high sort of correlation between sort of Christian American men and military service.
Yeah, I think that there's an inherent character connection between your military and your Christian, because both of them kind of have that basic, I want to, I want to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with military, we have this inherent, we want to protect those around us.
Yeah,
And it's, I mean, what was it that Christ said was, the greatest gesture of love possible is to be willing to, lay one's life down in defense of those that they love.
yeah,
And that is military 101.
yeah. So a lot of guys that I've spoken to, and it's more of a thing in America. It's not really. I mean, there's very few guys in Australia that, even that I know, that have sort of served in the military. But it does attract a lot of guys that sort of speak from the way you just did there. It's an act of service, and it's putting your life on the line to go and serve others. But I know a lot of people come out on the other side of it pretty jaded, thinking this isn't what I signed up for. How did you finish? Did you go, like, you went into it and you have this character? Did you feel like it did that, or did you come out of it jaded saying, "This is something else?"
That's an interesting story. As initially when I first went into the military, I was of the mindset, because we're really fortunate to have this program with our military. It's called the GI Bill. And
Mhm.
essentially what it does is, if you serve a certain number of years and you pay like just a small amount each month, then once you finish that time period, which in the case of the GI Bill, it's 1 year of paying, but serving 4 years of service, then you basically get this significant lump sum that allows you to, you know, go to university and get a college degree. And that was my initial plan. Was I was just going to go in, I was going to do my 4-year term, and I was going to get the GI Bill, then I was going to get out, get my degree, and kind of go a almost a civilian commercial type route.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, because as I got in, I started to feel this, almost it was a somewhat sense of purpose, in that I was, I felt like I was doing something that was making a difference. So I kind of figured, you know what, I think I'll stick around, at least, because I entered the military in 1996, and no, sorry. I had entered in 1994, and so I, went through my first term. I'm like, okay, I'll do one more term, just to kind of, make sure I got what I get the most benefit I can out of the military. And then, it was during my second term that 9/11 happened,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that completely changed so much in me and in my mindset, because I already had this certain degree of, kind of wanting to, do my part to, help make the world a better place for my wife and my kids. And then 9/11 happened, and that, to use the old phrase, that cranked that up to 11.
Yeah.
And basically, I I think this is where I need to be for, the foreseeable future. And I ended up doing the full 20. And when I got out, I was a little jaded, but not near as much as like what you've described, because I know several people that are like what you described. I was a little jaded, but that was only because, being an intelligence analyst, I analyze things to the nth degree. And
Yeah.
one of the things that you have to analyze as a military intelligence analyst is politics. You have to
Mhm.
study other people's politics, our politics, all of that. And just going, doing my work, doing my service, and noticing that there are people who are in positions of influence and power within government, who, frankly, they don't really let's be honest, they don't really have the nation's best interest at heart. All they've got,
Mhm.
the only thing that they're worried about is, what is going to get them more influence, what is going to get them more power, what is going to get
Yeah.
them more money, and what is going to get them reelected.
Yeah.
And so, to a certain degree, that jaded me a little bit. But as far as, being jaded of, I regret what I did, no, not for a moment. I truly enjoyed doing my work as an intelligence analyst.
Yeah, makes sense. Did you grow up Christian, or did you become Christian later on?
Again, another strange story. I was born in a small town just outside of Chicago, Illinois. I was baptized Catholic, and then my parents got divorced when I was quite young. I ended up living with my dad, who, I'll just say, growing up, he was notionally Christian. We didn't really go to church on any regularity. We didn't go to a particular church with any regularity. It was just one of those, it kind of, like I said, we were notionally Christian. And
Yeah.
then I met this absolutely wonderful woman. Actually met her about 6, 7 months before I entered the military, and she's kind of, she's something you don't find very often, in that she grew up absolutely dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, no question, and she's actually the one that got me back into the church.
Yeah. So she kept her faith,
Yes.
'cause yeah, 'cause I mean, there's a lot of kids that grow up. My wife, she grew up, she's sort of Croatian family.
Mhm.
She sort of went to, church every Sunday and Sunday school and the
Right.
whole lot. But a lot of sort of her cohort, by the time they got to 18, 19, and they got interested in boys and other things, they just stopped going to the
Right.
church. So it does lose a lot of people, as they get
Yes.
into adulthood as
Yes.
well. But your wife was obviously faithful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny because what makes her such an unusual situation is she grew up her entire life, like, probably about a 30-minute drive west of here, in a small town in South Carolina. Well, in the southeastern part of the United States, that area of the country is affectionately referred to as the Bible Belt,
Mm,
because it is overwhelmingly Protestant Catholic.
yeah.
I mean, every town in the Southeast, especially the smaller towns, you probably have 8 to 10 different Protestant churches for every one Catholic church.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so her, her being born Catholic, raised Catholic, paid Catholic, despite all of that, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen, because I've seen some of your interactions on social media. I'm sure you've seen Protestants can be pretty brutal towards Catholics.
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's been fascinating. And I sort of get it because I mean, I was previously pretty brutal towards Catholics as well. Where I where I don't like it now is that I I wish I mean, the whole journey from me going from sort of Protestant Christian, even though I was sort of a nomad
Mhm.
within that, didn't really belong to any church or, affiliate with any particular group, was when someone that I'd gotten to know and had as a guest on this show was like, "By the way, I'm Catholic." And I could have gone I sort of could have gone 2 paths there. I could have been like,
Mhm.
I thought you were smart, you're actually an idiot. I'm just gonna sort of write you off." But thank God I was humble enough then to be like, Well, that doesn't make any sense to me, but what am I what am I missing here?" And I had the
Right.
humility to actually sort of dig into it and ask questions, and then I just felt that one straw man argument after another fell over.
Yeah.
So I get the vitriol that some people have towards Catholicism, because now I see it, and it makes so much sense, is that everyone, Protestant or atheist, their whole life has been brainwashed into hating the Catholic Church,
Yes.
which makes a lot of sense that that would happen to the one true church. No,
Exactly.
so that I think is one of its great strengths. But it is, I found it interesting, guys that I have known and gotten to know and liked, and they know I'm not. I mean, I might call myself an idiot, but they know I'm not a total idiot. Like
Yeah.
we've agreed on a lot of things, and they're like, "Oh, you're Catholic," and just like the vitriol towards, like, "Oh, you're stupid. You're foolish. You've been deceived." I'm like, "Come on, guys." I'm like, "You've known me
Yeah.
for long enough. Like, I haven't just jumped at this decision. There's
Well, and
it's considered, and but it's, I think and you've got your military background, you'd understand this. It's a side effect of, like, brainwashing. Like, people
I
can't
think
see clearly with it."
And I think that's part of it. I also think, especially, and I notice a lot, the more, we'll say, fervent Protestants
Mm,
that tend to attack the Catholic Church. And this is kind of me with my military background, with my military intelligence background. One of the big things that I did in that profession was I did a lot of analyzing and studying, human behavior, patterns in human behavior.
mm,
And I find that the more fervent Protestants, they tend to have this very common character trait of they cannot fathom that they get really defensive about even the mere possibility they could be wrong.
yeah, yeah,
And so it's one of those, they have to be the one, they have to be the one that's right. They have to be, essentially the cornerstone of their faith.
mm,
And that's why they have such disdain for the Catholic Church, is because they can't imagine that, you know, there have been theologians that have studied this faith for almost 2,000 years, and all of them are well respected. All of them are very well written, well read, and all of them agree that, that this is the one true church. This is the church that Christ started. And, all of these people have done all this work and all this research, and you should probably listen to them. And that's where they kind of reach that impasse of they can't fathom somebody else telling them, you know, hey, this is actually what all of this means.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's a major factor in those types of people.
yeah. So what is the culture like in America from a Christian, but particularly from a Catholic point of view? Like when you talk about like where your wife's from, like 8 to 1, it's probably Southern Baptist and Reformed churches to Catholic.
Right.
Do you feel like you're very much in the minority in terms of faith over there, or is it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is as an intel analyst, I can't help but notice like patterns. And I
Mhm.
have noticed probably over the last maybe 8 to 10 years, there has been this increase of disdain just for Christianity in general,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
Christians are always, especially those that aren't Christian, there's always this immediate knee jerk assessment of they're uneducated, they're
Mhm.
superstitious, all of this stuff, which cannot be further from the truth. And so you've got this, all of the non Christian entities have such a great disdain just for all Christians in general. But
Mm.
then being Catholic, it's kind of a double whammy, because not only do you have all of the non Christians that don't like you, there's a huge chunk of Protestant Christians that don't like you. And so you just kind of, okay. And I say this fairly often. I say, being Catholic is not for the weak.
Yeah.
You have to be confident. You have to be almost unquestioning in your faith,
Mm.
because there are going to be plenty of people who are going to do everything they can to try and convince you that Catholicism is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, see, when I first became Christian, it was at a Catholic church. As an adult, and that was 3.5, 4 almost 4 years ago now. Um, and I was probably an example of what you've just spoken about there as someone who is not that. So I sort of went into a Catholic church because at that point in time, I had no interest in religion or faith or anything. I'd completely dismissed it. So I didn't even really know that sort of Protestantism was a thing. I just thought, and again, this for me is such a tick for the Roman Catholic Church, but as an outsider, I just thought Christianity was Catholicism. I didn't really know I thought that was it. So I went into this church because it was really the only place that I knew to go, and then found faith there. But then, as I started to come into the faith, I started to want to watch heaps of YouTube videos and all this other stuff. and all the stuff, and I was coming across heaps of Protestant content. And then and then it starts to dig on saying, oh, the Catholic Church they do this and they do that, and it's not a true gospel. And because I didn't have strength in by that point in time, I well and truly had strength in my faith in
Mhm.
Christ, but I didn't have strength in faith in the church and
Right.
couldn't defend it. So as soon as some of these sort of barbs were thrown, I was like, oh, I think these guys are right, and I sort of foolishly walked out. But I think it was probably the path I had to go on. But now walking back into it, it's like, I mean, I've had so many barbs thrown at me now in a month, and I'm
Yes,
like,
yes.
yeah, I don't really care.
Well, and
Yeah,
it's
I'm
one of
firm in
those,
my
and I see
position.
this. Well, and I see it a lot. I actually see it in real life. I see it online. You get these people who throw around these words like cult,
Mm.
you know, false religion. What is it? The what is it? The harlot of Babylon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All these terms, all these phrases, and I immediately all I can do is I immediately go back and I think of a famous movie line. It's actually one of my wife's absolute favorite movies. You may have seen it, The Princess Bride.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think of Inigo Montoya. I'm like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
It is. Well, so the funny thing with me is, when I first came to faith, I was obsessed with sort of like the end times, which is just the most
Eschatology, yes.
but it's the most destructive way to spend your time. And you see, I mean, jump on X and you see the Christians obsessed with end times on that. It's
Right.
debilitating. So as I mentioned before, I had initially these like videos I'm watching. They're like, Mystery Babylon, and the Catholic Church is the sort of manifestation of Mystery Babylon, and then I ended up coming out of that and moved into a sort of preterist view of things, which sort of sees a lot of past fulfillment. And I think
Yep.
clearly there's some Catholic apologists that argue that Babylon is Rome, and I think they're wrong, and I think they're wrong to argue that. And I see it as a polemic against the sort of Protestants that are saying that, the Roman Catholic Church is Mystery Babylon. They're saying, well, Peter wrote from Babylon, therefore Rome equals Babylon, and you're just misinterpreting what it means. I think Mystery Babylon clearly in Revelation and other points is pointing to sort of apostate Old Covenant Jerusalem. So I'd sort of firmly landed on that interpretation of things. So then, and also sort of looking into the nuance of what sort of the term antichrist means, and how John spoke about antichrist as, that there's many antichrists, and antichrist is one who denies that Christ came in the flesh. So then I started seeing all these arguments against the Catholic Church saying, well, it's Mystery Babylon and it's the Pope's the antichrist. I'm like, you guys are you claim to be sola scriptura, but you're not very good at your exegesis. Go and have a look at what these verses actually say. Deducing
Well,
that it's the Catholic Church out of it is a very,
yeah.
very bad interpretation.
Well, and a couple of things off of what you were just saying, yeah. Like the whole sola scriptura thing, I can't roll my eyes hard enough
Mm,
every time that I hear a Protestant say that,
yeah,
because as an Intel analyst, am yeah, I can't deny it. I am an unabashed history geek. I love
yeah.
studying history. And every time I hear it or see a Protestant using the phrase sola scriptura, I like to remind them very, very nicely, very kindly. I remind them, you do realize that that phrase and that concept, sola scriptura, actually comes from a 14th century Italian politician
Mhm.
named what is it? Something of Padua. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't
I
even
heard that this
come
week.
from a theologian.
Yeah.
It comes from an Italian politician. So it's like you're basing one of the cores of your understanding of the faith off something an Italian politician came up with, really?
It's,
And then
I held to it, but it felt like a house of cards once I started to actually put it under the microscope. It just
and then the other
it's actually a ridiculous doctrine, but most
yeah.
take it as they take it as gospel. It's sort of it's a core tenet of the
Yep.
gospel, sola scriptura. I put up a question this week saying, well, where in the because I'm a big sort of biblical narrative guy. That was
Mhm.
my way of understanding scriptures has always been to see that the scriptures is speaking of a narrative. There are real events that happened through 6,000 years of human history and a journey that man has gone on and a journey that God has gone on in terms of leading men to Christ and then establishing a church and everything that has happened post first century. So from the narrative, we obviously have all the patriarchs. We have Adam, and then we have Noah, and then we've got Abraham, and then that flows through to Moses and Egypt. I said, well, when did sola scriptura become the guiding principle? Because you can't possibly argue before Moses because there was no scripture.
Yeah.
And then if you
Well,
say, from Moses, well, at what point? Because Moses was leading the people with his words, and
right.
if he penned those words, like most of the people that were coming out of Egypt weren't reading Moses's scriptura.
Correct.
So you then have to say at some point after that, none of them can point to the period of time because it doesn't exist where they said, all right, guys, no more listening to these leaders. Now it's just sola scriptura, and and you just sort of follow the
Well,
scriptures.
and that's the other thing that I always bring up as far as sola scriptura is usually, especially your Protestants, when they're talking about sola scriptura, they are talking about what we in modern day refer to as the Christian Bible.
Mm, mm,
I, again, I very nicely and very respectfully like to remind Protestants that what you know as the Bible, one collection, one tome that consists of Old Testament and New Testament, that did not exist until the Catholic Church sat down and in the late 300s, very late 300s, and said, okay, we need to actually we have to have a defined canon as
mm,
to which books are are indeed God inspired, are indeed, canon.
mm.
And until that happened in the late 300s, there couldn't possibly be a sola scriptura because there was no defined scriptura.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
I like to remind them, yeah, that Bible that you hold to so closely and so dearly came from the Catholic Church, except for the fact that, about, 16th century, a bunch of theologians decided, you know what? They know better than, 1100 years of theologians. And so they took 7 books out.
yeah, yeah. And I mean,
And
even
then
if they, if they want to argue against, that, oh, well, it wasn't actually the Catholic Church that put it together, and it all came together naturally, and it just sort of appeared into a book. Then I'll say, well, what about like, okay, so we read the Gospels and we read
Mhm.
Acts. I mean, in Acts 2, Peter stands before the congregation and tells them what they're witnessing and what's happening. I mean, was that authoritative, or was it 100 years later when Acts was penned and we read about that it was? Do we have to wait until it
Right,
became penned? What
right.
about these poor people living in the transition period that didn't have scripture?
Exactly. And then I like to point out, okay, the books that you see in the New Testament, those are not the only
Mm,
things that the apostles wrote. They wrote
mm,
several other things. So, when the Protestants go with the whole, oh well, the Catholic Church, they didn't really do anything. They just compiled what was inherently logical. And I'm like, okay, so what about all the various other writings, all the other epistles, all the other letters that people like Peter and Paul and all of them wrote that aren't in the Bible?
yeah,
How that, to me, that completely just takes all the teeth out of, well, it was inherently logical which books. No,
mm,
there were tons of other writings.
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
was one of those the theologians of the late 300s were the ones who had to sit down, had to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and they're the ones who had to actually had to define, okay, this is included, this isn't.
yeah,
And I mean, one of the most influential and iconic theologians in the history of Christendom was one of the men who was chosen to define that canon. And that's a guy by the name of St. Augustine of Hippo.
yeah,
And so I'm just like, okay, so you're telling you're telling me that you are more knowledgeable, you have a better understanding than St. Augustine of Hippo's, arguably one of the 3 to 5 most influential Christian theologians in the history of the faith.
yeah,
I'm gonna call skeptical on that.
yeah. So what is the Catholic position on the other writings, like the other apostolic letters? Do they question their
There
validity
are
or just say that they're not canonical?
well, and it's funny because, and this has been written about ad nauseum, and what they do is they say, okay, the ones that are in the Bible, those are, no question, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That they are absolutely God inspired. They are absolutely key and core to the faith. But then they have another set of documents, of letters, of writings that they say, okay, they're not heretical, but they're not canon. They're kind of in that helpful category.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. So let's segue a little bit because I know you've got another project that it's fairly recently released, and you've
Yes.
you've written your book, so
Yes.
Unforeseeable, A Bargain with Time, The Cost of a Better Tomorrow. Talk to me about it. I haven't read the book yet, but I am going to read it. I'm just in a period in my life where I struggle to even sit down. And I hate saying I'm
Yeah.
busy. It's not even busy. It's just I'm working as a carpenter during the day. The kids
Right.
wake me up at about 4:30 at the moment. I work. I'm a I started it late in my life, so I'm on the tools during the day. I get home at 3, 4 o'clock, and I'm physically
Exhausted.
exhausted.
Yes.
And I used to read so many books, and now I'm like, I can't. I sat down last night to read a couple of pages. So I read 2 pages and then fell asleep. So I am gonna read it, but I read your
Yes.
detailed synopsis of it, and it's fascinating because it brings I guess it brings your faith in, but it draws on the really strange sort of cultural issues that we're dealing with at this point in time.
Yes. And
But
that's why when I
yeah,
wrote it when I wrote it, I kind of, and that's why whenever people ask about it, I say that it is kind of in a similar vein, in a similar style as the C.S. Lewis classic, The Screwtape Letters.
mhm,
Screwtape Letters was essentially almost like a warning of,
yeah,
hey, these kind of things are going on in society. We need to be a little more cognizant, a little more aware of these things that are going on. And so that's kind of what Unforeseeable is. It kind of points at some things that are going on in society that I think that people are not, they're not as cognizant about, they're not as aware of, and really need to kind of pay more attention to, because these are things that can, that can easily decay society as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, you spoke before about things changing a lot and sort of vitriol towards Christians over the last decade. Things have decayed a lot in a decade, haven't they?
Yes, they have. I mean, I mean, I just saw this morning, you know, in Iowa, or not Iowa, Ohio, here in the US, yesterday there was a Catholic church that caught fire
Mm,
and was severely damaged.
mm,
And that has been happening, often, probably in the last 10 years than it did in the previous, 50 to 75. I mean,
yeah,
you see all of the I read in the news where you see a lot of these very same things happening all over Europe,
mm,
where you've got, people vandalizing, people destroying, people burning Catholic church, some Protestant churches, but mainly Catholic. And you see it happening significantly more often in the last, roughly decade.
yeah. So I Australia's are a super secular country, like
Yes.
extremely secular,
Yes.
as you probably know, and like to put into perspective, I grew up sort of I went to a Catholic school, but no one was actually Catholic, and no one that left there is Catholic, and my parents weren't Catholic either. But I left and it was very sort of materialist through my 20s. So my network's not was not Christians at all. And then when I came to faith, so a lot of people are sort of like gobsmacked by it, but most of my friends are still sort of the same. But I have one cousin who's Christian. Beyond that, I struggle to think of a single person in my existing network that's sort of a fellow believer. But and this has happened over the last 4 years of as society and culture has degraded like at an increasing rate, even compared to the sort of 5 or 6 before it. And I find now I just stay out of most political discussions because there's almost just nothing to gain from it. But I found myself unfortunately locked into a conversation the other night with someone who's a partner of a friend of mine
Hmm.
and very, very typically sort of left leaning and typical of your average Australian, your average sort of Los Angeles resident or New York resident. And we got onto the, she started saying how, a lot of the problems with Catholic schools and how, because we're talking about my daughter going to a Catholic, and she said, oh, yeah, but, there's, these Catholic schools have lots of issues, And I said, well, what about the child abuse in the state school system where they're sort of teaching 5-year-old children like my daughter that she can transition into another gender? I'm like, why is that
Yes.
not child abuse, but the other one is? I couldn't help myself. I try to bite my tongue all the
I,
time, but I just bit in this instance. And
I,
then we got into a conversation about the whole transgender issue. And you know what? I'm pretty nuanced with it. I've had homosexual guests come on the show. I've got homosexual friends. I don't encourage their lifestyle at all, but I can still be friendly with them. And my most recent guest, which is coming out today, is actually a recent Catholic convert who was a transgender female. So a male who identified as female. And he was an awesome guest because he can speak on this whole topic with so much authority. Like he would run rings around anyone because he gets it. I mean, he's lived it. But what I found from this conversation is it's typical with sort of anyone in the world at the moment on these issues. Like they they would look at people like us like we've got two heads when we say that
Yes.
a male can't turn into a female. I don't care what they want to identify as. A male is a male. If they want to call themselves a female, that's their right to do that. They can do that, and I'll still not going to hurl rocks at them. I can still speak to them and show them
Yeah.
love and respect, but they're not a female. And now, for me to say something like that to your typical sort of modern, younger male or female, they think we have two heads. So there's an
Right.
issue like
Right.
that. Issues like abortion is just
Yes.
it's a normal thing to do.
Yes.
People don't even think they think that the criticism of it is just like, who on earth would criticize this? This is just standard sort of
Yeah.
reproductive rights, and they like to
Yes.
label it
I
and
hate
call
that
it.
phrase.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you've got two kids, I've got three. We went to the 8-week scan for all of them when we
Mm-hmm.
found out they were pregnant. I've got three kids asleep in the room next to me at the moment. Those same kids were in my wife's womb with a heart
Yes.
beating when I saw them at 8 weeks. I'm
Yes.
sorry, like that. It's the same child. It's not. They didn't. That human on that scan didn't disappear, and we were sent a child in the mail. Like it's a.
Right. Right.
But to say something like this is like we're on another planet to them. How on earth do we bridge this gap and have conversations where we can try to change things?
Well, and first to touch on the whole transgender thing, when people try to approach me like this is a normal and legitimate thing, they tend to, and I have two questions that I always ask, and of course it infuriates them,
Mhm.
to the nth degree, is I ask them, okay, so what does the person's DNA say? Because you
Mm,
can't change the DNA. The
mm,
DNA is what it is. So what does the DNA say? Does the DNA say XX or does it say XY? Of course, they don't like that question. And then the second question, which really infuriates them, is okay, you are we'll say a male that identifies as a female. Well, you just use that as an example.
yeah.
I will say, okay, so what is the difference between that and someone who walks around all day in a historically accurate, immaculate 19th century French military uniform and tells everyone they are Napoleon?
Mm,
What's the difference between the two? There is no difference. By both, if you take it down to the base fundamental level, they're both a psychological
mm,
condition where the person is refusing to recognize reality.
yeah, yeah,
And then, of course, the whole abortion topic, the way that I try to approach any kind of discussion with somebody that is pro abortion, and I have found that the minute you try to bring religion, especially Christianity, into the conversation, it basically shuts the whole discussion
shuts it
down
down. Yeah,
because they don't even want to go there. Oh, you're just trying to impose your religion and your lifestyle on me. And it's like, no. So
mm,
anytime I have a discussion on abortion, I go strictly with the science.
yeah,
Okay, you know, according to, you know, high school biology. According to high school biology, what does high school biology say? Is the definition of a living entity. A living entity is something that cells reproduce.
mhm,
It can essentially sustain itself. It has metabolism. It has growth. All of this. So, by biology standards, that's a living thing. By the scientific and the study of genetics, what does genetics say a human being is? A human being is someone who has a DNA, 23 sets of chromosomes, has the same basic structure, just, different minor changes as to things like hair color and eye color and all that. If it has the genetic definition of a human being DNA, and it has the biological definition of being living, then all religion out the window.
Mm.
Science says that is a living human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you start getting into the whole, well, you know, if it's a living human being, it has certain inherent rights, certain inherent things that are given, i.e., the ability to live.
Mhm.
And yeah, then you start getting the people, well, I don't recognize that as a living human being. And I'm like, okay, you realize how dangerous a road
Yeah.
you're going down. You're starting to go down, Europe, World War II, okay, we don't recognize these people as being actual human beings. And that is a very dangerous road to go down.
Mm. Have you had success in any of these conversations? Because it's
Um,
I agree with the I actually cringe. I had a conversation with a friend very recently about this. I cringe about a lot of the way a lot of Christians approach, particularly abortion, is
yes.
actually and transgenderism is the wrong way. Like they'll say,
Oh, I agree.
Genesis, God created them male and female. You're like, yeah, that's not really like Genesis is using metaphor to tell a story of sort of creation. It's not that's not a polemic against transgenderism. Like, and the same as like abortion, they'll say, God knitted them when they were in the womb. You're like, that was God speaking to Jeremiah the prophet, as a sort
Hmm.
of endearing thing. Like I knew you before you're in the womb. Like it's not that verse taken out of context is not dealing with abortion. You're like we can deal with these topics and other challenging topics using logic and reason, and throwing an out of context Bible verse at someone who does not believe the Bible is authoritative doesn't help
And that's
anyone.
why anytime I approach the abortion discussion, that's why I go the scientific route.
Mm, yeah.
Because if you're going the scientific route, this is irrefutable, confirmed, well accepted facts.
Mm,
And so that's why I kind of go that direction as far as having success. I think in all of my discussions I have had, I equate success in as being if the person actually sits, stops, pauses, and actually tries to think of it from that
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the whole, I can't be wrong mentality that is
Mm,
so prevalent in society today. And so I'm already resigned to the fact that I'm most likely not gonna get them to admit they're
mm,
wrong. But if
yeah.
I can get them to at least think about it. To
Yeah, yeah,
me,
yeah.
that is at least a minor victory.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that, I don't know if you've ever read it, that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
I've read small bits and pieces of it, yeah.
Yeah. There's a bit I mean, the principles in it are fantastic. I don't live them out
Mhm.
50% if 50% of the time, and if you followed them, like, it would
Yeah.
like, they work. But one of them, he talks about basically that point, like, you can't convince people they're wrong, and someone, if they've made a statement, he tells a story. I forget exactly, but it's like there's a dinner party and someone makes a statement about something and like says there's 8 of something, but there's actually 10 of them. It's like
Mhm.
if you say to that person, "Oh no, there's not 8, there's actually 10." You got that wrong. They're like they will double down and say, "No, I was right." There's like telling someone that they're wrong is the worst thing that you can do to someone. You need to basically help them on the journey to recognize their own error for themselves. They need to
Well,
feel, they need to feel like that they realized it and that they are empowered to correct their error. So,
and in a situation like that, my tactic in a situation like that would be, and just, using that 8-10 example, my approach would be to look at them and go, you know, I only must have miscounted. Let's go over there. Let's recount them.
mm,
See if I'm wrong.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, is this what you're trying to do a little bit with the book? And I hate to say it, but is society going to have to go down the path that we're on a little bit further and actually experience the side effects of some of the decisions that we're making until we actually will snap out of it?
Unfortunately, I do think that is going to be the point at which I think society will start
Mm,
kind of re-examining things. And
yeah.
that's why I wrote the book the way I did, because I basically took a almost an amalgamation of a lot of the types of people we've been discussing, the people that are, they're atheist and they're pro abortion and all this. And I tried to write it in a sense of, I'm not trying to jump up and down and say, oh, they're wrong, they're wrong. I just took and said, okay, I'm going to write the story out and I'm going to give examples that from perspectives most people don't think about, and say, okay, here's this person with this ideology, this mindset. And so he's going through and he's doing this. And I just try to point it out as, okay, yeah, I realize people have this ideology, but here are some potential, almost like pitfalls
Mm,
that these mentalities lead to.
mm,
Like the whole, and you know, Stephen's very pro-abortion, and in fact, in the book, he helps a young woman go into an abortion clinic and have an abortion. And then later on in the book, don't want to give too many spoilers, but he later finds out that helping that young lady go have an abortion has a to paraphrase the title of the book, it had an unforeseeable effect
mm,
that he never really saw coming.
yeah. Yeah, I think I've seen examples of it for example, with abortion where, we can look today and there's, or look back 20 years ago and there's for every abortion that did happen, there was one that was considered where they decided, no, you know what, we're not going to go ahead with the abortion. And then fast forward into the future, and there is that child who's now grown up and become an adult and become a human being who's out in the world doing things, and you think, well, like we were that close all that time ago to wiping this person from existence. So like it,
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean, some of the big examples that I like to give is, one of the big almost talking points to support abortion is things like, oh well, they've run tests, and this child has, they know that this child is going to have this particular medical condition that's very debilitating and is going to severely affect their quality of life. That's one of the big talking
mm,
points I always hear. And in situations like that, I'll say, okay, so I'll give you a scenario. I'll give you an example. You've got a husband and wife, both fairly well to do. It's very comfortable life. And then they find out that their child has this medical condition And, by the time the child is in their teens, they're going to be in a wheelchair. They're going to lose the majority of their motor functions. They're going to have to rely on people to do basic fundamental care of their body. you know, would you encourage that husband and wife to have an abortion in that situation? And many of them will say, "Oh yes, absolutely.
Mm,
That would be a horrible life for that child to have to live." And I say, "Okay, well, you realize in this particular situation, you have just deprived the world of Stephen Hawking."
mm,
Because, he could have easily, when he was still in the womb, he could have easily been tested. They found that out. They're, "Oh, well, that's not really a life that, we want our child to have." And they could have easily had the abortion. And think of what the world of science right now would be like if Stephen Hawking never came along.
mm. I think the other one too is like even people that we've never heard of, families who've had a
Yes.
child with debilitating illness. Like there's a famous football player in Australia who's actually one of the few public Christians in our whole world, but in down this side of the hemisphere. He's got a child he's I think he's got 3 kids now, but his eldest is a 5-year-old boy who's got a really rare sort of debilitating illness.
Hmm.
They didn't find out until he was sort of 9, 10 months old, they found it out, and I'm not sure how old he's gonna live, but I think there's a chance he's probably, dies in his
Hmm.
as a child. And, so like he can't walk, he can't talk, he can't do any of these things. But there's been some beautiful sort of stories with him, and they took him out onto the
Yes.
field and stuff like that. And so he's the definition of what people would say is a sort of debilitating life and struggles. But I mean, if you ask this guy Gary Ablett or his mum, you're like, would you return him? Would
Yeah.
you imagine a life without the 5 years that you get with this child? Like, there's not a chance that
No. No.
they would say that. It's like every moment is a blessing and a gift.
Yes, it
And
is.
if
It is.
it's cut short, then it is what it is. But some of these challenges actually help us. I see it all so many times, help us as human beings to appreciate life and see the joy and the beauty in things.
And it, especially in a situation like this, it's one of those things it gives us a close and upfront example of what the fighting human spirit is all
Mm,
about.
yeah.
This is a kid that could easily just, lay down and quit, but keeps
Mm,
fighting, keeps going, keeps trying to do their best. And without examples like that, where would we be as society
yeah,
to
it
be
becomes pretty
able to see
mundane.
that kind of fighter?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Stephen, the main character, he gets to
Yes.
the end, and not to give away the ending, I'm gonna tie this into the sort of key theme of the podcast. But when he starts to see all these things, and we can call Stephen the guy from the book, or we can call this yourself or
Yeah.
some random person that you meet, and he realizes that perhaps he doesn't have life worked out and there is more to it.
He doesn't know all the answers.
He doesn't know all the answers. What do you say? What is the point anyway?
Well, and it's, to me, one of the big messages that I think the book has is, you know, we don't have all the answers. Everything in life it's a learning process.
Mhm.
When we talk to people, when we meet people, and it's a constantly learning process. And one of the big messages of the book is, when you reach that point that you realize you don't have all the answers, or when you reach that point where you realize that you spent all these years being involved in and having your life revolve around these, let's be honest, not very good and constructive things in life. that is the truly wonderful thing about our church, specifically the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
is you have a proverbial army of people who, when we reach these points, when we realize that we've done all these things, their entire lives are dedicated to helping us and
Mm,
helping us kind of, okay, yeah, you screwed up here, but here's how we can help you. Here's how we can help you move forward. You can't erase the past. You can't change the past.
mm,
All you can do is go from here, and you've got all these people, these wonderful people in the Catholic faith who they dedicate their lives to. Hey, here, let me help you move forward from this.
mm. Amen to that. It's like, Revelation 22 talks about, the tree of life is in the midst of the garden. It's there for the healing of the nations. And John Bergsman, who's coming up in a couple of weeks on the show, he's quickly become probably one of my favorite theologians. But he talks about how the sacraments are the way in which that tree of life feeds out and healing of the nation. So it's exactly what you said there. It's like there's no person that's beyond broken that can't come in and be healed and be transformed, which is
Exactly.
really beautiful. I think it's the most beautiful part of the faith. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. I've
Thank you
loved,
for having me.
I've, thanks for volunteering too, and thank you to your friend Nathan who put us in contact.
Yes.
I've loved the conversation. It's been a bit of a different angle to any other guests that I've spoken to, and I'll look forward to reading your book, which I'm going to put a link to in the show notes. Is Amazon the best place for people to buy it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect. Well, I'll let you get on with your day, and I'm going to go and wind up mine.
I hope you have a good one. Thank you again.
Thanks, brother.